Hey everybody. This is something that I'm putting up in response to a video that a brother in Christ, a dear beloved brother in Christ, put up on his channel Through the Black. You can find him here on YouTube, and you can also find him at throughtheblack.com. Tom Dunn is just a marvelous work of God, and he's been a very much a blessing to not just myself but a lot of people, and he's been very diligent. And he put out a video today about in part of it was about, well, actually no, I think it was a couple of days, but about a documentary that he's doing. He does fabulous work in really, getting to the meat and bones of these stories that really need to come out. But he's his most recent documentary he's going to be releasing is about the Jehovah's Witness cult. He didn't quite term it like that, but I know for a fact they are a cult, and it's one of those harsh truths that a lot of people shun. Like he says in his video, most people just want them to go away, don't bother me, and totally avoid even thinking about the damage that these people do. And I know that personally. I'm sorry, moving around. I'm trying to find a good spot. I'm on my laptop this time, and instead of my phone that has no more room in it, or instead of my tablet that really has a bad camera. And I got this nifty little program, Vocal Screen, I think that's how you call it, that I used to use, so I can record the screen and you don't have this, this in your face constantly. But anyway, his video deserves a response, and because one of the things he mentions in there about is the fact that, how do you get people to care? And we can say that about a lot of issues and things that are dear to our hearts, or things that we're passionate about. How do you get people to care? I've had a big struggle in that myself, and that's why I wrote the book that I did in the manner that I did. There's a real big cliffhanger at the end, and I leave it at, contact me if you want the rest of the story, is basically how I ended my book. And not to give too much away, but the Jehovah's Witness, I'll be nice this time and say organization, is something that personally has impacted my family. Largely for the worst, but also I have a really cute story I want to share, because I was able to take what I experienced growing up as a child and witness my mom going through, and use that to help encourage and equip my own children. And I'm going to start with that story. So if you don't mind, Tom, I'm going to babble a bit, and I'm hoping that you are able to make the time to watch this. If not, I encourage everybody to, even if you just hit Tom up here on Through the Black with that little 2 through the black squared, I guess that's what that's supposed to mean, and just subscribe and follow his channel there. He puts out a lot of. I'm actually subscribed. I'm not signed into YouTube right now, so I'm not lying. I am subscribed to you, Tom, I promise. But anyway, so when I was living in Michigan in 2002, we had lived there for probably a little over a year by then, and my son, who was in second grade at the time, second grade, he had really, done his best and done very well in, making friends in this very tight-knit, very small town community. It was Lakeville, Michigan, so, Lakeville, you can tell, just by the name of it, you can tell it was like a really small town. And the mayor's son was one of my son's classmates, and he really earned himself some bones, get him and that group of kids to be his friend. And so they're growing together and thriving together. A lot of decent Christian people up there. And the it was around Troy, Michigan. They've got this big mall with this big amusement park inside the mall, and that's where Philippe wanted to have his birthday, his 9th birthday in 2002. And it's getting closer, and one of his friends that he really, really liked, um, he was, he became friends with the group of kids because Philippe was friends with him. He was normally that kid that kind of sat off to the side. Nobody, picked on him and didn't really dislike him, but he just wasn't really forthgoing, and he wasn't like part of the crowd until Philippe, took up friendship with him and tried to include him in on things. My son was just an amazing child. But, so Philippe comes home from school one day and he's kind of sad about, his birthday plans and stuff. And I asked him about it and he said, well, what is a Jehovah's Witness? I'm like, oh my gosh, a second grader. So I explained it to him the best I could. I did not use words like cult and get really harsh about it, but I just explained to him that they, he was upset that because this one friend was not he was a Jehovah's Witness, that he could not attend a birthday party. Let that sink in for a minute. When Tom talks about the mind control in these people, they infiltrate every area of your life and begin to program your mind to see every good thing as something worldly and wicked or even outright evil, and that you are not to participate in it. I remember, I didn't, I wasn't invited anywhere as a child, and I'll get into that at a little bit later in this, but I got to share the good story first, how this turned out, so how we can take what we endured, what God brought us through and trained us through, and use it for good for others to hopefully change this generational malarkey. So I asked, my son, so, what do you want to do about this, after he kind of understood that they have certain rules. And he first just looked at me with these big tears in his eyes, and he's like, well, I want to pray for him first. I want to pray for his family. And he said the most sweetest, very simple, very childlike, beautiful prayer, which I think those are the most beautiful. And a little bit later, he come up to me and he says, well, I don't have to have a birthday party. I just want to hang out with my friends. This was coming from a second grader that loved his friends so much he was willing to forego birthday presents and cake and all that stuff and make it all about him so his friend could come. So we planned everything, we did it all, and we made sure it was close to his birthday, but it wasn't on his birthday, and it actually worked out better because it landed on a weekend. We were able to plan it on a weekend, and all of his friends came, including that little boy from the Jehovah's Witness family. And some of the families did bring presents for Philippe and hid them under the table, so it didn't appear to be like they were trying to get around the rules a little bit. But the kids had a blast. It was such a blessed time. I think there was like 8 little boys, 8 second grade boys, and they were so well behaved. And a couple of the families, because all the moms hung out, and I think there was one dad there, and a couple of them had to bring the younger sibling along, because I just told them, you don't have a babysitter. We're at a theme park. Come on, just bring your kid. And my husband and I, at the time that we did that, we were very blessed. So we just handled the whole thing, and so they hid some birthday presents under the table, and everybody just went and had a great time. And the mother of the little boy that was from the Jehovah's Witness family took me aside, and she's got these big tears in her eyes, and I'll never forget the way she looked at me, and she said, "Thank you so much." She says, I respect my husband, and I respect our faith, and I want to honor that, but it hurts so bad that he's never included in anything. And I just told her, it's like, don't thank me, thank Philippe, because he came up with that by God's grace all on his own. And I share that, excuse me a minute, I'm getting a little mushy on you. I share that because we can take these horrible things, like these things that Tom's saying, that it's really horrible to hear these stories, but we have to. I mean, you don't need to be like us and researching and listening and interviewing over and over and over again to a bunch of different people. But you have to listen at least a couple of times. So you and take it before the Lord, so you can let God use that to help other people. Because I'm telling you, these people are everywhere. Abuse comes in many forms, and in many organizations, not just the church, not just cults, not just, satanic ritual abuse and stuff. It's literally everywhere. So somebody that you're sitting next to on the bus sometime, if God's tugging at your heart, strike up a conversation. Don't ignore it. Anyway, I didn't come here to preach at you. I wanted to share with you, Tom, and others who might be listening. I can't remember when it started because I was very young, but I do remember when it ended. When I was growing up, over here on Graham Road in Stowe, we had a really nice backyard, and 2 aunts and uncles lived right next door to each other a few blocks away. And I always thought it was cute because they each only had boys, and I was the youngest of 5, and I'm obviously female, and my 2 aunts would fight over me. I loved that. That was awesome. Talk about spoiled rotten, right? But anyhow, my mom would have, cookouts in her backyard, and we'd all have fun and stuff like that. And I think it was around, I was about 11, 12, around there. And that's started slowing to a halt. And the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall, by the way, Tom, they do not ever call themselves a church. Just a little side note. But the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall was, after a while, right across the street. And there didn't used to be houses there in front of it, so we saw it 24/7. I mean, every single night, that place was packed out. Half the day Sunday, that parking lot was full. And my brother Rick and I, who's about 18 months older than me, were forced to go over there all the time. And it finally got to a point where I was just like, Mom, I don't like it there. I don't even remember clearly why I didn't like it. I just didn't like it there. But my mom's brother and brother-in-law and their families were, her brother was a deacon, later became an elder, and made his way up the hierarchy of that organization, and their families were hardcore JWs, and they were trying to convert the entire family. I remember my mom begging with her mother. I don't remember, in hindsight, I understand now what it was about, but back then I didn't understand the friction. And my mom was not, God rest her soul, was not one to be easily controlled, manipulated, or programmed. Trust me, as a teenager, I tried. But anyway, and she started having questions about what they were teaching. And mind you, I was really young, so a lot of this is retrospect, kind of putting pieces together of things that I remember through that time and what I know now. And she started sharing her concerns, and she started getting shunned. And then she found this group called the Anti-Watchtower Society, and started getting a lot of information from them, and she would double check what they were teaching with the word. And then she became concerned for her brother and her sister and their families. Who wouldn't? But her concern was looked at as just being a deviant, being a disruptor, and an embarrassment to the family. So around 11 or 12, they stopped inviting her to things. They stopped coming over to the house for things. My mom changed their diapers and babysat them right in the middle of 8 children growing up in the sticks, what used to be the sticks out in Northampton. And they couldn't show her a little respect. Well, then it got to a point where, we're being visited by members of their organization repeatedly. They were like they would come wouldn't even call a lot of times in advance, but they would come and just show up to see what we were doing, and and then I remember what it was. The clincher was when my cousin, I won't mention his name, and I miss him dearly. To this day, I wish Heath had. Oh, I just said his name. Did I do that? But anyway, I wish we would have been able to grow up together, but they ended up moving to Florida and whatnot. But we were very close in age, and everybody thought we were twins. I thought that was kind of cool when I was a little kid. But he was spending the night, and in hindsight, again, putting things together, I could see that this child, who was probably about 10 years old, 10, 11 years old at the time, was, because it was unusual for any family in our family unit to let their children spend the night at my mom's house. She was a single mom. Oh my gosh, how dare her. But anyway, so in retrospect, I can see that it was done on purpose to see what she did on the weekend. So Saturday morning, she's up with two little old ladies, literally two little old ladies and another lady around her own age, all from different churches. My mom obviously didn't really have a church at the time because she was still struggling with the JW thing. And they had their Bibles open in their laps in my mother's living room, in the privacy of her own home, talking about Jesus. Well, my cousin went and told his daddy, who was an elder at that time, and my mom's brother-in-law, and then the chaos began. They sent people to her house over, and they first reprimanded her, which I don't really remember what that entails, and constantly phone calls, letters, basically, telling her in very eloquent, deceiving speech, you better repent of this, or, you'll be shunned from the entire community. Well, my mom got to, the more they pushed, the stronger my mom got. And, it was really heart-wrenching for her, but God gave her the strength to push through it and stand against it. Her concern was my brother and my sister and their families are caught up in this and fully controlled with this. And I don't know if she knew anything about the trafficking and other forms of abuses of children and stuff. I don't know. We never talked about that. But it got to a point where months later, after the constant browbeating and beating on the door, and just, sometimes my mom wouldn't even let him in, they sent her brother over. Now, mind you, this is her baby brother that she adored more than all of her siblings. That was her baby when, she was in high school? Anyway, when she was growing up, taking care of him. And they sent him over. I think he was an elder at the time, to talk to her about basically just trying to change her mind, see where she's at after they beat on her emotionally for months. I'll send the brother in and see if we achieved our goal, right? And she just stood her ground, stood strong, and she flipped it back on him. She's like, Joe, I love you. Don't you understand what this is about? And he'd, try to, just dissuade and stuff. I remember that conversation because I was sitting at the dining room table. They were sitting in the living room, and it was pretty close. So I finally asked him, I said, Uncle Joe, what is going on? Why are you making my mom upset? And he, to the best of his ability, I guess, in very simple terms, was trying to explain to me, and this is how strongly they believed their BS, that, that he was concerned for my mom and her salvation, and on and on and on. And I was kind of, I guess I looked kind of puzzled to him, because he says, well, let me put it to you like this. And I remember this just like it happened yesterday. I'm like, I think it was 12 years old, almost 12 years old, something like that. And he says, let me put it to you this way. If there was a bus, and he pointed across the street in the direction of the Jehovah's Witness Kingdom Hall. He says, if there was a bus outside the Kingdom Hall, and the world's coming to an end. It's all scary outside, fire and stuff everywhere. He says, and only the people that were on that bus were going to be saved from it all. Wouldn't you want to be on that bus? And I thought about it, and I looked at my mom, who had this look on her face like she was afraid of what was going to come out of my mouth. And then I looked back at my uncle, and I'm like, you really believe that? That only the people from your place over there would be saved from that? And he said, yeah. And he said some other things to try to convince me he was right. And I can't remember those things, but I remember the sincerity in him that, yeah, he believes it. The world's coming to an end, and only the JWs are going to be saved. And if you're not one of us, you're gone. And I just looked at him and was like, well, Uncle Joe, I think we need to pray for you. Because that sounds like you're really putting limits on God. I thought God could do everything. And he looked at me with such disappointment and a look of anger that I had never before seen in my uncle's face. Slammed his books in his briefcase and stomped out the door, slamming the door behind him. And that was the last time for many, many years that my mom was able to spend any decent quality time with her baby brother. And that tore her up for many, many years. Hindsight's 20/20. There's a lot that I wish I would have understood better then. And I probably would have been a lot easier on my mom. Hold that thought. But I'm hoping that people can take this now and do some good with it. Or maybe it's like similar to some things that you may have experienced or witnessed or whatever. But and then fast forward. So we grow up isolated. Single mom of 5 kids. Isolated from family for the most part. I mean, her brothers and sisters that didn't really participate in the organization did have pretty regular contact with her, but they all treated her like she was something lesser. And well, all except for maybe the oldest one. Vernon was her favorite too, and my mom was his favorite, so that kind of worked out a little bit better. And then my mom would get leaflets from the Anti-Watchtower Society and sneak across the street at night when they were all their cars were parked and put leaflets on their cars and stuff. I didn't know that when I was a kid, but later on, I think it was 2011, shortly before my mom passed, all of a sudden everybody starts going, oh, well, I got to serve my own conscience and, go spend some time with this woman before she dies. I was infuriated because I was staying with my mom at the time, and I told my mom even asked me, because my Uncle Joe stopped by quite a few times, and he had stopped by here and there through the years, kind of snuck over to see the older sister and and spend some time together, but this was like more regular, and I love the fact that my mom towards her end got to see them and spend some time with them, but they did it only to serve their own conscience, and that infuriated. My mom asked me about it. She says, well, why do you seem so bothered that Joe, was coming over and stuff, and I think she even saw his wife a couple times. And I told her, I said, because it's selfish. But I told her, I said, Mom, it's up to you. I said, I haven't seen these people for literally decades. And, they abandoned us when we were very young. They abandoned you, and from here to Florida, blacked your name. And I forgave them, but I'm still working on the mercy part of it. So and I told my mom, it's like, whatever your decision is there, I will support you. And she finally, I guess, did get to talk to her brother, at least for a little bit of how that affected her. At one point in time, I added my 2 cents very politely and respectfully. And then my Aunt June brings up my Aunt Mary, which is the baby sister from Florida, and the JWs that really was, I think she was the worst against my mom all those years. And she sat, there's a bunch of people in my mom's house, and my mom's kind of, pretty feeble at that point. And she's sitting in my mom's chair in the corner of the living room, clutching her purse like she can't wait to go. And then my Aunt June takes me aside, and then, so, because I told her, it's like, if Mary wants to leave, get her out of here. And she's like, oh, well, it turns out June, of course, the kind-hearted woman she is, literally dragged Mary up here. So June was serving her conscience, I guess, for both her and Mary, whatever. And I just told her, I was like, in that respect, she's not welcome, but that's up to my mom. And so it literally from the time I was 9, 10, 11 years old until my mom passed in 2011, the mind control and programming of the Jehovah's Witness cult was that deeply embedded that even, her baby sister sitting in the corner of her living room looking at my feeble mother getting ready to die had no compassion for her and sat there with a wicked look on her face like she just couldn't wait to get out of there. That's how dangerous that cult and others like them are. I mean, I could go on about how they, demote the deity of Jesus Christ to, they'll sometimes acknowledge him as a prophet. And how they literally change the words in the Bible and wrote their own Bible. There's a lot of stuff I could go on about, but I think I'm just going to leave it right there for now. And again, Tom, if you have found the time to watch this, I hope it helps in your endeavor, and if nothing more, to encourage you. I thank God that you're doing this documentary on the JW cult, and I am constantly praying for you. Even more so, I don't know why my phones keep going off while I'm doing this, but I guess I should have turned them off before I started this. But anyway, I am praying for you and your crew's protection and perseverance through it all, and I pray that this documentary is anointed and it gets to a lot of people, and that God breaks their hearts for what breaks his. Because my mom lived with a broken heart for a very long time. But praise God, a couple years before she passed, God got through to her. And she had peace and joy for those last 2.5 years of her life. And you're going to have to read my book, the first, at least the first couple chapters of my book, to hear that story. Thank you so much again, Tom, and thank you everybody for listening. It is January 21st, 2026, and we're already off to a good start. Thank you.